Hi, in this video we will be covering the Home tab within Microsoft Word right here. We will not be covering every single button in this tab, and in future videos we will not be covering every button in every tab, so we'll just be covering and highlighting some of the features. I'll be skipping over some of the obvious ones like I've mentioned in the past that I think are pretty obvious. But one of the ones that's not obvious to start off with is this Format Painter option right here. Once again, I would have this lecture notes document up if you want to follow along, and pause the video as you go through, try it out on your own. So Format Painter is one of the most useful buttons, and a lot of people don't know about it. So let's say we had a font, some line that was some fancy color, size, font style, like this one we just created. And I want this line right above it to match. Well, you could go through and try to find every single difference. If you'll notice, if I click on one line versus the other, you can see some of the changes up here in the top. But there's a much faster way than going back and forth trying to see what the difference is. If I want to make this line right here look like this line right here, all you got to do is click on that line that you want to copy the format from, click on this little paintbrush, Format Painter, and then highlight the words that you want to match. And then let go of the mouse and it'll show up the same way. So a lot of times you want to make things match. So for instance, notice this font right here is slightly different than this font right here. You can see up above the size is 12 font in this line, but in this line it's size 11. Yeah, you can easily go and highlight this and change the font size, but sometimes you're not sure if that's the only thing that's different. So it's best, even if it's something simple, to always use the Format Painter because it'll copy everything. All right, and I don't know if you know this either, but you can change fonts in 0.5 increments. So let's say you're writing a paper and it has to be exactly one page and you're going a little bit over or a little bit under. You can always change your font to say a 12.5, or maybe 12 point, well, let's see, it was 12.4. Nope, only only increments of 0.5. So slightly bigger, hardly noticeable, but you have to type it in. It doesn't show up as a default option, but it is an option you can type in directly. All right, let's move on to this button right here, the bullet point numbering, bullet points and numbering buttons. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I get a file and somebody numbered it manually and like this, and notice it's trying to format it automatically, but sometimes those numbers don't get formatted as a number automatically, like a list. Somebody does, let me try again. Somebody puts a number 1 and then a number 2 and then number 3, and then someday you go in there and you need to put something between number 1 and 2, and that's the new number 2, and notice this number didn't start over, and that's because these weren't numbered the correct way. So I'm going to undo, and the best way to number items is by using this numbering button up here. And you'll notice it's in Roman numeral. Well, no, it's in an outline form right now. You have different options. You can do ABC or Roman numerals or just the straight numbers. But now if you put a line in between, it'll auto format the next numbers, so you don't have to worry about updating everything. You can change these to bullet points by using this bullet point number button right here as well. You can also use this button that says multi-level list, And the multi-level list is kind of like an outline that you would do in a class. So if I chose just this option right here, if I press the, say on this second line right here, if I press the tab key, every time I press the tab key, it moves over one spot. So if I press tab, it indents it one spot, but it also changes what's in front. And so this is a subcategory. And so one of the things you should try right now is highlight, a few lines, give it a multi-level list, choose one of these options here. And so all three will be numbered the same. And then press the tab button to indent it over one line. And then try it again. Press the tab button to indent it over one more. And suppose you indented it over twice, you can press the backspace button, or you can press Shift Tab, hold down Shift and press Tab, and it'll move it backwards instead of forward. If you look at the Tab key on your keyboard, you'll notice you can tab to the right or the left, and usually to tab to the left, you have to hold Shift down. We'll be practicing this in the lab. Row spacing, there's this button right here, is row spacing. That should be pretty obvious. If you want to make the spacing between the rows more, you click on that button, make it spaced out. Sometimes the spacing, let's say if I chose a spacing of 2, you can't click and put anything in between the two lines because that's space right there. So if you want to get rid of this extra space in between rows, you have to change it right here. Now, for me, I've noticed in the past sometimes you have this space in between, such as between this line of text and this line of text, and I can't remove that spacing even though it's on a 1, even though it's on a spacing of 1. So that's what this button does right here, remove space after paragraph. In Word, the default is after every paragraph to have a little bit of extra space, more than a normal spacing of from line to line. So if you need to remove that little bit of room right there, click on this, remove space. Sometimes you have to remove the space before the paragraph or after the paragraph. One of the things to note is there's all these styles up here. So see, it says styles. And there are all sorts of types of styles, but there are a couple that actually really mean something that we'll be using next week. And those are the headings. So if you want to make one of these, you see a heading and it looks pretty cool, and you want to use it, that's fine. But those are usually reserved for times when you are planning on making a table of contents. And so we'll be going over that next week. There's this button called the Find button you may have used before. You can press Control F to find a certain word in a document. So try that, press Control F, and it brings this navigation menu up. But that same Find button is right here on the right side. And so you can click on Find and it'll also bring this up. But usually for advanced finds, if you want to, say, find something and maybe replace it, you can do the advanced find. It'll bring up this window. And so let's say I want to find the word the. I'm sure it's in many places in this document. And so every time you find the word the, it'll highlight it. There are more options. Maybe you want to match whether it's capitalized or not. It has to be, perfectly capitalized the exact same way, or there's all sorts of other options in here. But let's go ahead and try to replace the word the with apple. So every time you see the word the, we're going to replace it with the word apple. So you click on this replace button, and you'll notice it brings up the same window as before. It's just in a different tab. So what you're going to do is find the word the, type that in, and we're going to replace it with the word apple. And if we were to replace all of them, they replaced 46 of them. And do you want to continue searching from the beginning? When you do this, it starts from wherever your cursor was and goes down to the bottom of the document. And so you might want to do the top of the document too. So now we see the word apple. And usually you can just press Control Z and it undoes it. But, oops. But suppose that doesn't work and now you have the word apple everywhere. You can always just do it again. Click on Replace, type in the word apple, and replace it with the word the. This is super useful when you're writing code because you're trying to replace words and variables with other names. Maybe you spelled somebody's name wrong the entire time. Maybe like somebody's name like Colin, you spelled with 2 L's or 1 L. You could just replace it everywhere in the document all at the same time by replacing all. All right. Very useful find and replace. It's the same thing here. If I wanted to, if we want to change the name from Joe to Roger, we could do a find and replace. A couple other things. Sometimes you want to select everything in the document. So yes, you can highlight everything, but if this is, a 30-page document or 100 pages, it'll take a while to highlight everything. So there is a keyword for selecting all. It is Control plus A. If you press Control A, it'll highlight everything in the document. Another thing that I found troubling is sometimes you accidentally double click in between 2 pages. So if you were to double click in between these 2 pages, notice it brings the 2 pages together and gets rid of the spacing. So if that ever happens to you, sometimes you like to see one long scroll type of document, but usually you don't. You want to see the pages, so just double click in between the pages again and it'll bring it back up. One last thing here, if say I want to highlight and I want to put a strike through, I want to strike these words out. That's pretty easy. It's this button right here, strike through. So you click on that. But what if I want to do a double strike through? You'll look up here and you'll notice there's no double strike through. So if there's an option that you've seen before, but it's not in the default menu, it's always going to appear in this bottom right hand button within this group of buttons. So try this. Go ahead and pause the video after I show you. Highlight this word, click on this button down here, and it brings up more options. And right there is the double strike through. So once in a while, if you can't find a certain button, it usually can be found in these drop-down bottom right buttons right here. Now I know I didn't cover every button in the top menu, but a lot of these you can probably figure out on your own, such as sizes and making the color changes and stuff like that. So I'm not going to cover that. We'll eventually see all of them throughout the course, but that'll be good for now. So that is it for this video.